Hey guys, welcome to Cigar Church, where our passion for cigars and our love for Jesus come together, and boy do we got a good one for you today. Of course, to my left I've got Dan, to my right I've got Steve. We're excited about not just the cigars we're smoking, but the topic we're talking about. It's a good one, and so before we get started, Dan.
Hey, something that's important we want to kind of hit on. If you watch our channel, if you're something and you like these videos, hit that subscribe button, like the videos. YouTube uses that for algorithms, and it really helps us out. It might surprise you to know about half the people who watch our channel aren't subscribers, so we'd actually would be considerably larger. But you know, it's something you can do for us, and that way, if you tickle the bell, you get notified when new videos drop, and you can you won't miss a beat with all the videos that we share online.
If you do like them, also please share with your friends.
Yeah, absolutely. It helps. It doesn't just help get us out there. It helps get the gospel out there, and that's really important. That's what we're more important. It's way more important than what we're doing. So, and it's a good way to do it. If you got cigar smoking buddies that you're like, hey, check this channel out, and you're not comfortable or confident yet, and talking to them about Jesus, it could open a door for you and be an easier way for you to connect with them. Also, always, Steve reminds us.
Prayer request, email at contactcigarchurch@gmail.com, stevecigarchurch@gmail.com, or just put in the comments.
And we have a really special event coming up. October 19th, 2024, we have our first annual Cigar Church experience that we want to invite you to. It is in Hochatown, Oklahoma, which you may not have heard of Hochatown. That's okay. It's north of Broken Bow. It is in southeast Oklahoma in the Kiamichi Mountains. Beautiful place. You will know about Hochatown over the next few years. It's becoming, as Southern Living magazine actually said, it's the next Hamptons. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but it's a beautiful place. We want you to be there October 19th. It's a completely free event, but we do have 50 VIP passes that we want you to take advantage of. Here's what's really cool. The VIP passes, the first 25 of those, the first half of those 50 are going to be free for those who register. So get on our website, cigarchurch.net, and register for the cigar experience, the Cigar Church experience. And those first 25 that register will get a VIP pack for free. The second 25 will get those last remaining 25 VIP passes for $25 each. And we guarantee you're going to get a gift bag that's worth at least double that, with things like t-shirts, cigars, stickers, all that kind of stuff. You're going to love it. So come out and be a part of that. If you miss out on one of those 50 VIP packets, you can still be a part of the Cigar Church experience. Come out and enjoy. You just don't have to pay. Just come and see us. We'll be having some live music. We'll be doing an episode live from the event, have some teaching, and just kind of some good time hanging out. And so check out our website for more information on that. Hey guys, what are we smoking today?
Oh man,
this is a good one.
Oh man,
what do we got? You want to tell us about
cigars.
it?
You the one up?
So yeah, I went and picked these up. These are Bolivar, I hope I didn't butcher that name, Habanos. These are actual Cuban cigars.
Picked them up in
Canada. These are actually picked up in Victoria, because Canada does not have the embargo against cigars. And so I went to a small shop in Victoria, and they had these. Now, funny thing about Victoria, in Canada, cigars have to be sold with a band around them to cover. There's a
for
law.
Some reason that beautiful band's going to entice you to smoke a cigar.
That's the belief. But so when if you go there, all the cigars are going to have these bands over top of them. But if you go to a reputable place, you can definitely find Cubans in Canada. And so this is the first time I've ever smoked one of these. I think we've smoked one of these. Fantastic cigar.
Wonderful cigar. Steve, you spoke of the same thing?
It was a gift from Dan. So
gift from Dan. And I'm going to have to be honest on camera, man. Dan gave me one as well. We sat on them for about a year.
We did, yeah. That's been
and I got tired of waiting. This beautiful Cuban cigar staring at me in my humidor. And I smoked it for a really good reason. It was my birthday. And I smoked it. We hadn't even started Cigar Church when Dan gave them to us.
Right.
These guys held on to them. And when we started talking about doing a Cuban cigar episode, they were like, we got to break those bowls Bolivars out. And I was like, well, let me tell you guys, I've already smoked mine. So I'm smoking an H. Upmann Cuban cigar. My very first real cigar was an H. Upmann sun-grown. My very first Cuban cigar was an H. Upmann. So I figured this was the right cigar to pick for this. So we're all three smoking Cuban cigars today. I should be smoking a Bolivar with these guys, but I jumped a little early and smoked mine. They've been picking on me for a while about it. And so Cuban cigars, what's the fuss, guys? What's the big deal as we cut and light these
Fix to
cigars?
find out.
Yeah, I mean, everybody talks about them. I think,
It's one of the things, if you can't get it,
you can't
the
get
rage.
it. It's hard to get.
It's that forbidden fruit, right? Are they any better than any other cigars?
So there's differing opinions. You definitely have those who believe that no cigar is a Cuban if it's not made in Cuba. But then you also have a lot. I mean, cigars, one of those things, if you're a Cuban guy, you pay to have them brought in or however you get your Cubans. And you're all about Cubans, great. We're getting ready to find out what all the fuss is about. I have had one Cuban before, but it's been forever. But again, I'm Nicaraguan. I'm Nicky D. I love Nicaraguans. So it'll be interesting to see how this compares. Now, but I will say this before I turn it over. Cuba is the place where this really, everybody talks about rolling in Cuba. The cigars. Yeah. So I would say Cuban cigars are definitely one of those places where it's kind of a standard, in quality, because if you get a true Cuban, it's probably going to be a quality cigar.
One thing I've noticed in some of the Cubans, I haven't had a whole lot, but I've smoked a few Cuban cigars. They're usually a lot more tightly rolled and a little bit harder to draw on than anything else.
This draws great.
Is this your first Cuban cigar?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've had one.
I have had one other.
I maybe had 5 or 6, maybe 10 at most. I had a wonderful conversation with one of the guys at Rodriguez Cigars in Key West. And if you have watched the show, we've talked about Rodriguez a number of times, one of our favorite brands, simply because we love Key West and we love cruising, and we've all three in our own times discovered Rodriguez Cigars. Rodriguez started in Cuba, and when the embargo happened and you had a lot of the cigar makers fleeing Cuba and bringing their seed and their leaf with them, Rodriguez was one of those. And in that conversation, I was talking with the young gentleman that I was talking with there is one of the Rodriguez family members, the grandson of the couple that started Rodriguez. And as we were talking about it, he said, one thing that a lot of those Cuban growers realized when they left Cuba and brought the quality seed with them and that kind of thing is they actually found better quality soil outside of Cuba. And they weren't restricted by the government and controlled by the government, so they had a little bit more freedom in how they grew it, how they made their cigars. And so what you're going to find a lot of is that, yes, Cuban cigars are wonderful cigars for the most part. There's some that aren't good. There's some that are just terrible, of course. But there are Cuban seed tobaccos, Havana seed tobaccos. Foundation has a great Havana seed cigar. And there's a lot of those that come from the Cuban background and have all the beautiful things that make a Cuban cigar good, but are actually better now because they found better places to grow them. They've had the freedom to do more things with their Nicaragua, like Nicaragua, like Dominican. There's a lot of places that just make really good cigars off of what they learned in Cuba and off of those seed and those same plants that made it out of there. And so Cubans are, it's a good deal to get a Cuban. If you can find you a Cuban, get one. And enjoy it. But if you
Can't you find some at like cruise ports like Cosmo?
Yeah. Let's talk about that. Where do you find you mentioned Victoria, British Columbia in Canada, and going into a reputable shop.
In Canada, they're highly regulated. Cigars are highly regulated in Canada, so you're probably less likely to get fake ones there. I'm sure they exist, but I have a feeling they probably really latch down on people selling fake Cubans. Case in point, when Steve talks about, you'll go to cruise ports, especially Mexico, anywhere, but a lot in Mexico, Cozumel, Costa Maya. be careful.
We have Cubans. We have Cubans.
Yeah, I mean, everybody
Yeah.
says we have Cubans, and you know, I'm sure if you're part of a lounge, somebody at some
Somebody's
point
bragged, yeah.
has come in with a Cuban.
Yeah.
You know, and the band's not right, the band's off center. You know,
or you can just tell by the quality of it. It's terrible,
just
right?
like, look, this, you know, you got scammed. You know, not to say the cigar's bad.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but you know,
Not what
they're conning.
think you're getting.
So that's a good point. Not to say that it's a bad. Now there are some really terrible fakes
Oh,
that
man.
have some trash literally in the cigar. We were down in Roatan, Honduras, on a cruise. We were doing some shopping, my wife and I, and we were kind of walking through a little village. And there's a older lady sitting out in front of a shop, and she's hand rolling cigars in front of the shop. And I was watching her, and being a cigar smoker, I know enough about good looking tobacco, and it was quality tobacco. And so she's rolling them and bundling them up. And I asked her, I said, how much for a cigar? $2. For a single cigar. So I got one off of her, and I lit it as we're walking around, and it was a really good cigar. Man, for $2, one of the best cigars I've had for the price. So as we came back around, I bought a bundle of 20 off of her and put it in a bag, and we went into the store that she was rolling them in front of. My wife was looking at some jewelry and looking at shirts and that kind of thing. And as we're in the shop, she's bringing in those bundles that I just paid $40 for 20 cigars. She's bringing those bundles in and setting them on the counter. And so I'm thinking they're going to sell them in there. And as I'm watching the gentleman behind the counter, and I'll use that term loosely, gentleman, he grabs those bundles and he moves them aside, and he reaches in a box underneath the counter and starts pulling out the worst counterfeit bands that I've ever seen printed. Like he printed them on his inkjet printer that morning. He starts putting those bands on these cigars and putting them in a glass case in the shop and selling them for $15 a piece as real Cubans.
There you go.
And I just watched the lady roll them out front. And so I say all this to say that really the key is, they may be a fine cigar.
Yeah.
They may be a cigar worth smoking. So don't get, if you took and bought a cigar that you thought was a Cuban and isn't, it's not to say it's trash. There might be some that are, and there are some that are. But sometimes you're still getting a good quality cigar. You might have paid way too much money for it, though.
Possibly.
And so when you're in the Caribbean on a cruise, what are some ways that you can tell? We talked about the band being poorly printed, where the lines are off, or you can just tell by the band. You're like, did they really put this out? Especially Cohibas, you can tell by the quality of the band a lot of times. What are some other ways?
I know the big thing in Cosmel and places like that, they put those little glass top containers.
Yeah.
The little 5-box with glass top.
Yeah.
I will say this with 100% authority. If you buy cigars in a glass-topped box in any port in the Caribbean, it is guaranteed to be fake. They are not real Cubans. They're real cigars, but they're not real Cuban cigars. And so just know that. You're not getting a good deal on some Cubans when you do that.
Yeah.
What are some other ways?
Sometimes it's hard to spot a fake. I mean, for me, if somebody's like 2 Cubans for $10, I'm like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just that doesn't happen.
You get
because,
what you pay for.
You do it in Canada. Of course, they have a lot of taxes as well in Canada. But I mean, for these, I think I paid somewhere around $35 a stick for these. You're going to pay up, and so not to say you're not going to pay up for a fake one, because some of these people know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I watch. If it's a tiny little marketplace place
It's not
where
a real legitimate
shop.
that
Yeah.
you can do your research on and know that it's
Right.
legitimate.
So here's the key, talking about shops, here's the key. And if you really want to know you got a legitimate Cuban cigar when you're in the Caribbean specifically, and other places in the world, there's a shop called La Casa de Habano. La Casa de Habano. And I always get it mixed up. But that shop is actually owned by the Cuban government. And everything there is guaranteed to be a Cuban cigar. You're going to pay up. You're going to pay prices that you're going to think are outrageous.
Yep.
But if you want to smoke a legit Cuban cigar and you're down in the Caribbean, you're traveling around, if you find a La Casa de Habano, you will for sure get a Cuban cigar. So when you get off the boat and all the little shops that got signs that say Cuban cigars, they may or may not not be legitimate Cubans, but you know for a fact if you go to a La Casa de Habano, you will find a Cuban cigar for real, and all they have is Cuban cigars there. And so let that be just kind of a little tip for you. On that note, we were in, I think it was St. Kitts on a cruise, and went into a shop right in the port, and everything I saw, everything was legit. It was legitimate Cubans. The problem is the place was full of tobacco beetles, and every cigar had holes. I picked up a cigar, and the beetles actually started going down my hand. And I showed it to the guy, and he ushered me out of the shop. And so just be mindful that wherever you're at, be looking for stuff like that. And you can find a great Cuban cigar in a lot of ports in the Caribbean. And these cigars are great, wonderful cigars that we're smoking today. Hey, we got something new for you we want to do very quickly. And we're going to call this segment, Let's Smoke a Cigar and Talk About It. So we've got a clip we want to show you, and I want to preface this clip a little bit. I hate using this word, but it might trigger you a little bit.
It did me.
I mean, as a pastor, my blood boiled when I saw this clip. And I want to say this. As we show this clip, specific denomination is mentioned. We have no problem with the denomination that's mentioned. We have no problem with anybody in that denomination. Nope. We actually have a love for the denomination that is mentioned. We are not trying to pick on anybody. We're not trying to make fun of anybody.
No.
We're not trying to point fingers at anybody. And I didn't run this by you guys, so correct me if you disagree. The individual that's in this clip, if you happen to see this clip, we would love to have a conversation with you, and love to engage in a conversation with you. And so I'm going to give you an open invite. If by chance you come across this clip and you're the person that's in this clip, reach out to us, and we would love to have an open conversation with you, or reach out to us and hate on us all you want. That's okay too. But without any further ado, let me show you this clip, and we'll smoke a cigar and talk about it when it's over.
Hey, sit down. Sit down. What are you coming up here to do? You want to come take over the service? Huh? What do you want? What?
I just want a prayer read.
Get out of here.
Can I get a little grace?
No, you can't. No, you get out of here. Get him out of here. Drag this bozo out. Pull him out. Hey, help him out. Get him out. And you know what? Anybody wants to come up here and take over the service? We'll throw you out of here, buddy. This church is not a free-for-all. This isn't an open mic. This isn't a karaoke bar. Okay? I'm the man of God here. I meet the qualifications. I run this church. And if you don't like it, then get out. This is not some church where every first-time visitor and brand-new believer and people who've never even read the Bible are going to come up and take over the service. Not happening. Okay? If you want that kind of watered-down leadership, go to some house church with your Amish buddies and sit around the coffee table with your coffee clutch. This is a New Testament church. We have a bishop here. We have an overseer here. Like it or lump it. And if you don't like it, feel free to get up and leave the service at any time. Or 50% of people walk out. I don't care. Because you know what? I'm not going to pastor a oneness cult. Amen. I'm not going to pastor a Pentecostal church. I'm the pastor of a Baptist church. Amen. And if you're not a Baptist, then get out. Amen.
All right, guys, let's smoke a cigar and talk about it. I don't know about you, but the clips like that kind of make my blood boil as a pastor. What are your thoughts, guys?
I have no words. The first time I watched that clip, you had sent it to us a few weeks ago, and I just, wow. I don't know what to say about it. To be fair, like we discussed this earlier. To be fair, we don't know the situation. This could have been somebody who was trying to.
Don't matter.
I understand. Somebody that could have been trying to be disruptive. Maybe we don't know. But the reaction was completely over the top. There was absolutely no call for it, and some of the things he said was very disturbing. Even just to say what he said was disturbing.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple things that really stood out to me. Number one, he called him two different names at one point: idiot and what was the
bozo.
Bozo.
Yeah.
Here's the deal: if you've got somebody coming into your church, that's a disruption. I get that.
You want to handle it as quietly as you can, as discreetly as you can.
100%.
But there is such a need to have decorum. If you want to talk about a guy coming up and interrupting service, the way that he responded in name calling, to me, was even a bigger disruption. And we had my last church, we had this crazy thing happen. I'd given my resignation and was leaving to start Identity Church and Cigar Church and all that. And 2 Sundays before my last Sunday, this guy comes walking in, and let me set the scene for you a little bit, because it's really quite comical. I'm getting close to the end of the sermon, and when somebody walks in that late, I mean, we're at the end of the service. We're about to wrap up the sermon, do the invitation, do one more song, everybody go home. So a gentleman comes walking in, actually 2 guys come walking in down the middle aisle. And when you come into church late like that, we had a huge auditorium. There was seats in the back. There were a lot of seats in the back that these 2 gentlemen could have sat down on. But as they're coming in, they just keep walking all the way up to the front. And I'm going to say this, and I don't mean anything negative by it. It was clear that these men were homeless. And as the first guy's walking in, they're both in trench coats. It's in the summer, late summer. They're both wearing trench coats. And so kind of out of place. As the first gentleman gets to the very first pew, he turns to go down the pew to sit down, and I see the second gentleman. I could see it was 2 people, but I couldn't make out the second gentleman. The second gentleman had his trench coat on, but had a life vest on under his trench coat that kind of looked like a bulletproof vest. Ooh. Okay? But what he was carrying was what threw me off. He was carrying a samurai sword into the service. Okay? Now, my first thought was, what are my ushers doing in the back that they missed a guy carrying a samurai sword in? But whatever. I had a conversation with them later that was humorous. They come in and sat on the front pew, and I had an option at that point in the service. Do I make a scene about it? Everybody saw him come in. It was a disruption. It threw me off on my sermon. I preach without notes, and so I have a flow with my memory and all of that. And as they came in, I was gone. I could not, like, it really messed up where I was at in my sermon and that kind of thing. And so as that happened, it was a disruption. I don't know if it was as much of a disruption as what this guy supposedly created in the clip, coming up asking for prayer. But I had an option. It's do you say something to him? Do you address it? Do you embarrass him? Do you engage in conversation with it? Or do you just keep doing what you're doing?
Right.
And clearly in that clip, you had a couple of guys that were handlers, which are men that are ready to interact with a distraction like that, or God forbid an active shooter situation or whatever. They're made, their positions made specifically to come up and interact with that. But boy, did that went off the rails quick. I mean, what else jumped out at you on this clip?
Hang on.
Go ahead.
I know what the audience wants. Finish your story.
What did you do? The story.
What did you do?
I picked up. Good catch, Steve. I picked up where I left off in the sermon, kind of. I was clearly off kilter a little bit because there's a guy in front of me, about 10 feet in front of me, with a samurai sword, and I'm not the most agile guy in the room, and I'm thinking if this guy jumps, what's going to happen, and so we went on with the service and went over at the end of the service and introduced myself to them, and actually had a phenomenal conversation with them, and they came back the next week on my last Sunday, and I don't know if they ever came back after I left or not, but instead of making a big deal about it and having them escorted out, I was able to have a great conversation, and a few people came up and met some of their needs. They were there because they needed some food and needed some stuff like that, and so they were taken care of in that. But it turned out positive instead of as negative as that was. But what else jumps out to you in that clip?
Well, to me, I feel like I got a pretty long fuse, but it didn't take long for that
to boil up.
Oh yeah, I don't understand people can sit there and just listen to that and not walk out.
So let's analyze it. The guy comes in and he asks, in case you couldn't hear it, he comes in and asks if he could have a prayer read. Now, in the defense of everybody involved in this video, we don't know the history. We're making some pretty big assumptions off of just a couple of maybe 2-minute clip, and we don't know what the guy's history is there. We don't know if he's come up and read prayers before that had some things in them that unbiblical, or who knows. We don't know any of that. We don't know what he was instructed by. If he talked to the preacher before the service and said, "Hey, I would like to come up," and the preacher said no, and he did it anyways. We don't know any of that, but he comes up and asks if he could read a prayer, and immediately all hell breaks loose, quite literally, and he's ushered out by the handlers. Then the preacher goes on this tirade of sorts of we're not going to do this. This isn't a karaoke bar. This isn't a free open mic. This isn't the Pentecostals. This isn't a oneness church. This isn't this. And we are Baptists. I'm a Baptist preacher. But then he does something that just blows my mind. Did you catch it?
Which part?
He says, "I am the man of God."
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that statement?
Pharisee.
Pharisee, wow.
I've been involved in ministries, like you have in years, and we've had our share of disruptions, because if you're in a church for any length of time, it does happen. But to have somebody to stand up in front of a congregation and say, "I'm the man," I'm all about order. Order is important, and I'm all about leadership. I'm all about maintaining order. I mean, Paul talked about it. There's definitely a place for that. But I guess in those situations, like you said, we don't know the circumstances behind the clip. You only see the certain clip. But what would have happened if somebody had come in saying, "I need prayer," that was off the street, your situation, what would have happened?
Yeah.
Because order has its place, but we're a ministry first.
Yes.
And I think in some ways, to me, the church, some of the church, I'm not going to lump everybody together, some of the church has redefined ministry as this patriarchal, hierarchical thing. Okay, we're in a ministry, so now this is legit and we're legit, and it's just this big thing,
Almost a production of sorts.
but ministry in its definition is service. Service to the people. Ministry, you're supposed to be there ministering to the people. And when you have a pastor that stand up and says, "I'm the man of God, I've been to Bible school, I'm doing this, and by gosh, you need to listen to me."
I'm the qualified one. I'm
You've completely missed the point, because the point, and I'm sure you would agree with this as a pastor's job at the end of the day is to serve. You hear clips all the time of, somebody gets arrested and is like, "I pay your salary." Police are out there to serve the public, but that also means they're out there to serve the greater good, just like a pastor is. But guess what? Part of that ministry and part of that service is to help people who may not fit in your template, in the pattern that you want. He's not wearing a suit and tie. He's not coming in dressed to the nines. He's coming in with trench coats and samurai swords. That's a little extreme, but you know what I'm saying? And it's important for us to look at and say it's the pastor's job to make sure that person's needs are met first. And when you go into this angry tirade, I don't care if it was justified or not. It's like Steve said, I would have walked out. I don't know how anybody could stand. I would have just said, "You don't want me here. Obviously, I'm not going to get anything here." I'll give you another great example. I know I'm talking my head off.
You're good.
I think I'm talking more than I've talked on every episode
That's
before.
good, though.
We went to a church, and I'm not naming names, that was having a yard sale. And, we walked in and was like, okay, and we had, I had to use the restroom. No, my wife had to use the restroom. And she walked up to the people at the front that was running the yard sale and said, "Excuse me, can you tell me where the restroom is?" And they said, "Oh, our restrooms are not for the public." And she called me and she told me, she's like, "I have to leave because I have to use the restroom." And I was like, "They don't have restrooms?" She's like, "Well, they're not for public use." And I'm like, the first thing that came to my mind was the scripture that talked about, you know, you were thirsty and you gave me drink, you know.
Yeah, and you gave me a toilet.
Yeah, and I was.
I'm pretty sure that's it.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, you know, you read between the lines, and I was just amazed because I was like, you know, me then walking out of that. I mean, and not that I was looking for another church by any stretch. 'Cause we were actually at Identity at the time, or our Identity. I would have said I would have never greased those doors again.
Yeah.
I would have said, really? I understand you may have to clean a bathroom before Sunday,
Yeah.
but that's the least you could do.
Yeah.
I just don't understand it. And it's that service versus worshiping the church mindset, if you will. I think there's a difference there.
Yeah, absolutely.
How many people have you encountered that say, I don't go to church. I don't like church. I've had a bad experience at church.
Yeah.
And that's stuff like
Because
that.
of that video,
Stuff
yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
That
because-
kids, they're all us. I don't want to say we're a good church, but us good Christians that get us a bad rep.
So let's do this. Let's make an assumption. Let's say everything that preacher did in that video was justified. It's a hard stretch.
That's a
big stretch. But let's just give him the benefit of the doubt for just a second,
All right.
for the sake of the conversation.
No.
Let me see where this is going and see what you think. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's say that guy who came up to have a prayer read had an agenda, had something that was extremely disruptive. I don't even want to speculate what it was, but was really there to stir dissension and to cause problems and to have all these issues. Let's just say that's what he was doing.
Okay.
And the way that the preacher responded was out of protection for the flock.
Okay.
And let's make one more assumption that he had been battling this problem for a long time and it just finally boiled over. Okay?
All right.
Let's make all of those assumptions. Now
We're
here's
playing
my
stretch
question. We're
Armstrong.
stretching
And
here.
it's rough.
Let me throw one question at you.
Okay.
If you were a first-time visitor that day, how would that make you feel?
I'm
I'm
leaving.
not coming back.
I'm
Exactly.
leaving.
Exactly.
I might not go to another church. I might think they're all that way.
This is my point. You might be completely justified in something that you do. This case aside, in some interaction you have at your church, some interaction you have in your family, some interaction you have at work or with your friends, you might be 100% justified in what you have to say. You might be 100% justified in how you want to say it. You might even be 100% justified in letting your emotions take over in the moment. But there are always consequences that are bigger than your justification. There's always consequences that you may not see in the moment that affect somebody not involved with it, that you probably, when you find out on the day Christ returns, or when you find out the week later when a guy sends you a nasty email saying, I wish you wouldn't have done it, whatever. I brought my best friend. It's the first time he's ever been in church, and now he won't ever go back to church because of this.
But it's wider than that. I mean, let's face it. This video went viral. This video is all
That's why
over
we
social
saw it.
media,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. There's 10 others.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that watch this video, and this is all they see. They don't understand. Well, maybe there was circumstances, and maybe it was justified. They don't care about all that.
Yeah.
They see the angry tirade, and at that point, I guarantee you, there's people that go, "Yep, this is why I don't go to church," and somebody's going to witness to them someday, and they may say, I watched this video, and this is the way church is, and I have no desire to be a
Don't
part
want to
of it.
be there. Yeah.
It's bad.
When all churches are painted with the same brush based off of just the few little things that somebody like this sees, and that's bad. Here's what's really interesting about it. This is not a new phenomenon.
No.
This is not something that just started happening recently. Now it's only gone viral recently because of the advent of the internet and social media.
Yeah.
But there's a text I want to look at in Luke chapter 18 where we have a very similar, not type of event, but we have a very similar attitude that is revealed through one of Jesus' teachings. And so we're looking at Luke chapter 18, starting in verse 9 and going through 14. And it says this, and catch how this section opens. This is Luke giving you the reason behind what Jesus is about to say. It says this, to some who are confident of their own righteousness and look down on everybody else, Jesus told this parable. Now, I'm not going to get into the parable real quick. Do you think that statement applies to the clip we just saw? I mean, come on, right? I mean, that is exactly what we're dealing with when we've got somebody who says, I am the man of God, I am the qualified one, I am the one who deserves to be up here. We're dealing with somebody who is confident in their own righteousness. And then when it says, and look down on everybody else, I don't know if he looked down on everybody else, but he for sure was looking down on that one person, that I'm better because I'm the one who's qualified, and this isn't karaoke night, this isn't open mic, blah, blah, blah. And here's how Jesus replies to that type of person. He says this: 2 men went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. And in the culture that's hearing this, the Pharisee was considered to be the most righteous person ever. That they were known by their righteousness. They were known in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7 when Jesus is doing the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus says that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees, he's using the Pharisees as this top pinnacle of righteousness, at least tongue-in-cheek to a degree. But a Pharisee, this righteous person, and a tax collector who was a traitor, who was selling out his people to give the Romans their money, and so you got polar opposites of the spectrum, right? To one who was a Pharisee, one who was a tax collector. So the Pharisee stood up and prayed about himself. God, I thank you that I am not like other men, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector right here. I fast twice a week and give 1/10 of all I get. So you got this first prayer of a Pharisee, and he's just bragging about how righteous I am. I'm not a robber, I'm not an adulterer, I'm not an evildoer, and I'm better than this guy right here. What's the problem with this prayer, guys?
First of all, he didn't go to the temple to pray, but to rather boast how good he is.
His focus is on himself. He's not at the temple to focus on the Messiah. He's not at the temple to focus on God. He's at the temple to focus on, look how good I am. Now, what a horrible way to live. If the extent of my hope and my righteousness is in who I am and how good I am, what a horrible way to live. But catch this. Verse 13 says, but the tax collector stood at a distance, didn't even feel worthy to get close, stood at a distance. He would not even look up to the heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on a sinner like me. God, have mercy on a sinner like me. In some translations, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And then Jesus says, I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted.
See, the Pharisee went to boast how good he was, and the tax collector went recognizing his sin and begging for mercy.
Yeah.
Okay, which one's exalted? Which one's justified? Which one went home justified?
The tax collector.
The tax collector. And here's what's important, and here's why we wanted to show you this clip. And like I said at the first, please understand our heart. We're not trying to shame this man. Nope. We don't even know the man's name. Nope. We're not trying to shame his church. We're not trying to shame his denomination. But it illustrates a really important point that as followers of Christ, we must understand and we must practice that your faith, your righteousness, anything that you have that is connected to the belief in Jesus Christ is truly not about you. That's it. As this tax collector realized, we are all sinners, and we are all under the grace of Jesus Christ. We are under his mercy. And when we recognize and when we realize that yes, we may be doing some good things in this life. Yes, we may be doing a cigar podcast that we get to talk about Jesus. Yes, we may be running a church. Yes, we may be doing all of these things that are righteous things to do that we're doing by the grace of God and through the power of the Holy Spirit. None of it is about us. The only thing that's about us is that Jesus had to come and die on the cross for our sins because we sinned, because of our mistakes, because of what we've done, that his righteousness had to step in and his mercy had to step in. And when you have this juxtaposition of the self-righteous Pharisee and the lowly sinner who says, God, take mercy on me, have mercy, show me mercy because I am a sinner.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the position we should be in. And Steve, you're 100% right. That the Pharisee did not go home justified, that the tax collector did because he begged for mercy.
I also wrote down, being self-righteous is dangerous and will cause you to despise others and affect anything from God.
That's powerful, brother. That's powerful. And when we stop hearing from God, the only voice we're hearing is our own. And that leads to arrogance, that leads to pride, that leads to us to think we're the ones who did all this. We're the ones who got in that position. We're the ones who put our effort out, and we're the ones qualified, and we're the ones who are going to control this. I bet it would be hard for somebody in a position like that to view the church as God's and not theirs.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
And that's the key. That's the key. And I love Jesus's final statement. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went away justified, went home justified before the Lord. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. And I think that's the key that we need to live by, is that we humble ourselves, that we don't lift ourselves up, that we don't exalt ourselves, that in our humility, the person we exalt and lift up is the person of Jesus Christ. Other thoughts?
You nailed it.
Good, good. Well, here's the thing. I'm going to say it one more time. If you're the man in this video, we're not bashing you, man. We want what's best for you. We want you to come into repentance, and we want you to know the mercies of Jesus Christ. We want you to have this attitude to have God have mercy on me, a lowly sinner. Not because we're exalted over you, not because we're higher than you, not because we look down on you, but because we are you. We are sinners as well. We are people who have made mistakes, who have let our tempers flare, who have run off at the mouth as well. And we open a channel of discourse with you, whether public or private, it doesn't matter. If you would love to have a conversation with us, we would love to have that conversation with you. If you'd like to even defend yourself, we would love to have that conversation. What do you guys think about these Cuban cigars? Are they everything you expected them to be?
So,
Go ahead.
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I mean, the draw is a little tighter than I like, but the flavor, it's different. I've always heard it was different, and it is.
Yeah.
There's a,
Yeah.
I can't really pinpoint.
yeah.
It's
But so the draw is what you expected, though, having that tighter draw like you hear Cubans
it's
have.
tighter draw.
Yeah, and you V-cut it, so I'm wondering with a straight cut if that would have
See,
opened
I
up
straight
more.
cut mine.
Maybe we
and
do with one of each, but
it's tarring up a little bit.
Really?
Just
Okay.
a little bit. I'm having to open it up a little bit. I'm a little tight on my cut there. But
I do like the flavor.
Yeah, I mean, the
different.
flavor's there. Am I going to go buy a box of these? Well, no, because I'm not a millionaire. But, you know, it's one of those things that there's better cigars out there in my mind. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I'm Nicaragua, you know, Nicky D, so, you know, I'm going to keep smoking my Nicaraguans, but it's a good smoke,
Yeah.
you know, for what it is. And I would encourage anybody, if you ever get a chance to get a real Cuban, try it.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
because it's different. It is different. There is notes in here that I don't think I've ever had.
Yeah.
You know, and it's funny because when I first lit this one up, it made me remember the last Cuban I had years ago, and I was like, I tasted that, and I think that's probably the Cuban thread that's running through that tobacco. So yeah, it's interesting. It's different. So
Good. You enjoying them, though?
Yeah,
Good?
yeah. It's a good
deal.
cigar. Yeah.
Good deal. Well, neither one of you can say, well, you couldn't before, but Steve, you can't ever say you've never had a
No.
Cuban cigar. So I'm glad Dan picked those up for us. This H. Upmann's great. It's got a little bit better draw than I expected, and I mean it's a great cigar. More medium than I'd kind of hoped. I was hoping it was going to be a little bit stronger. We've smoked a few cigars already today, and a couple of those were really strong cigars. And so my flavor palette's probably a little bit worn out. And so I can't tell you a whole lot of the notes right now off the top of my head. But I mean, it's a wonderful cigar, and it's burning pretty good. I did do a straight cut, and a pretty generous straight cut on it, and so I'm getting a good draw through it. It's tight to the touch, and it's not squishy or anything like that. And so I can tell it's really tightly rolled. But yeah, it's a wonderful cigar. If you smoked a Cuban cigar, let us know. Tell us which ones you've smoked, which ones you've enjoyed. There's a lot of really good ones out there. The Cohiba Bahikis are phenomenal. Epicure number 2 from is that from Hoya, I think? Yeah, Hoya de Monte Cristo. So let us know what you smoked and what you've enjoyed. And if you've got a secret, if you've got a kind of one of those honey holes, if you will, that you've gone down to in the Caribbean or even in Europe or somewhere like that, and gotten some legit Cuban cigars, let us know where those are if you want to. But we'd love to have a conversation with you some more about them.
And I'll share the place where I got these in the comments.
Yeah, we'll share it in the comments.
description.
Yeah, it was in Victoria, British Columbia.
Yep.
I've been in the shop. Shop owner's a neat dude.
Yes.
I kind of made him mad. I hope he doesn't remember that. But yeah, wonderful shop there. And so yeah, let us know where you pick up your cigars, your Cuban cigars when you do. Anything else you want to add to the conversation, guys?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, don't forget to subscribe.
Yep. Subscribe and tickle the bell.
Tickle the bell, that helps out. And as always,
If you need some prayer requests, put them in the comments or email us at contactcigarchurch@gmail.com or stevecigarchurch@gmail.com.
all right, guys. And as always, smoke a fine cigar to the glory of God. We'll see you next time.